Hello, and welcome back. In this blackexcellist series, we will highlight 10 banned books by Black authors.
Welcome to Blackexcellist. This is where we celebrate Black excellence, achievement, and affluence. Our mission is to inspire you as we enlighten you.
The past 10 years have been marked by an escalation of book bans and censorship in classrooms and school libraries across the United States. We are seeing the effects of new state laws that censor ideas and materials in public schools by labeling them as harmful or explicit. Black literature has long been a target for coordinated campaigns of censorship, even back during the Harlem Renaissance, as our greatest Black writers have always been feared for highlighting our struggles and underscoring the injustices of American society. So we will do our best to counter this relentless effort to remove Black-authored books from our libraries and schools by highlighting 10 books that have been targeted for censorship, or just bringing to your attention some very fascinating books to add to your collection. So without further ado, let's get started. 16-year-old Star Carter moves between two worlds, the poor neighborhood where she lives and the fancy suburban prep school she attends. The uneasy balance between these worlds is shattered when Star witnesses the fatal shooting of her childhood best friend Khalil at the hands of a police officer. Soon afterward, his death is a national headline. Some are calling him a thug, maybe even a drug dealer and a gangbanger. Protesters are taking to the streets in Khalil's name, and cops try to intimidate Star and her family. What everyone wants to know is, what really went down that night? And the only person alive who can answer that is Star. But what Star does or does not say could upend her community. It could also endanger her life. An award-winning writer of young adult fiction and poetry, Reynolds frames America's history of racist ideas for an audience of middle school and high school readers. Reynolds' remix is bookended by an introduction written by Kendi and an afterword that transitions the reader out of the historical narrative and, hopefully, into anti-racist action. The book establishes several patterns through which to organize and understand historical racism in the United States. The authors divide racist and not racist into three categories. Number 1. Segregationist racism, which is the commitment to the separation and hierarchy of races. Number 2. Assimilationist racism, which is the push to integrate Black people into white society and abandon Blackness. And number 3. Anti-racism, which is the school of thought that believes in full racial equality. The 1619 Project is a series of essays, poems, and short fiction about the lasting legacy and implications of slavery in the United States. Named after the year the White Lion anchored and sold the first enslaved African people to the English colonies, these essays rethink the United States origin story to explain how a country founded on ideals of freedom preserved the institution of slavery and the lasting legacy of it. Throughout the collection, Nikole Hannah-Jones makes it clear that the institution of chattel slavery in the United States was not simply in the background of history, but rather at the center. The colonists built a country off the backs of the enslaved, protecting the institution of slavery through the Constitution, which laid the infrastructure for intergenerational wealth for white people and systemic racism for Black America. In a profound work that pivots from the biggest questions about American history and ideals to the most intimate concerns of a father for his son, Ta-Nehisi Coates offers a powerful new framework for understanding our nation's history and current crisis. Americans have built an empire on the idea of race, a falsehood that damages us all, but falls most heavily on the bodies of Black women and men. Bodies exploited through a history of slavery and segregation, and today, a pattern of police brutality and disenfranchisement. What is it like to inhabit a Black body and find a way to live within it? And how can we all honestly reckon with this fraught history and free ourselves from its burden? A moving, timely letter about the struggle for racial equality by Ruby Bridges, featuring stunning photographs throughout. On November 14, 1960, at the age of 6, Ruby Bridges became the first Black child to integrate an all-white school in New Orleans. Escorted by federal marshals past angry segregationist protesters, young Ruby attended William Frantz Elementary and earned a place in civil rights history. 60 years later, Ruby has written an impassioned letter to young people engaging in the fight for racial equality. Her words, a call to action imbued with love and grace, are paired with black and white photographs from then and now. Raised in South Carolina and New York, Woodson always felt halfway home in each place. In vivid poems, she shares what it was like to grow up as an African American in the 1960s and 1970s, living with the remnants of Jim Crow and her growing awareness of the civil rights movement. Touching and powerful, each poem is both accessible and emotionally charged, each line a glimpse into a child's soul as she searches for her place in the world. Woodson's eloquent poetry also reflects the joy of finding her voice through writing stories, despite the fact that she struggled with reading as a child. Justice McAllister is top of his class and set for the Ivy League, but despite leaving his rough neighborhood behind, he can't escape the scorn of his former peers or the ridicule of his new classmates. Justice looks to the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for answers. But do they hold up anymore? He starts a journal to Dr. King to find out. Then comes the day Justice goes driving with his best friend Manny. They have the windows rolled down and music turned up, sparking the fury of a white off-duty cop beside them. Words fly, then shots are fired. Justice and Manny are caught in the crosshairs. In the media fallout, however, it's Justice who is under attack. A coming-of-age tale for young adults set in the trenches of the Vietnam War in the late 1960s, this is the story of Perry, a Harlem teenager who volunteers for the service when his dream of attending college falls through. Sent to the front lines, Perry and his platoon come face to face with the Viet Cong and the real horror of warfare. But violence and death aren't the only hardships. As Perry struggles to find virtue in himself and his comrades, he questions why black troops are given the most dangerous assignments and why the US is even there at all. In the early morning of June 1st, 1921, a white mob marched into the Black Greenwood district, a thriving, affluent neighborhood known as America's Black Wall Street. They brought with them firearms, gasoline, and explosives. The Tulsa Race Massacre is one of the most devastating acts of racial violence in US history. In this book, award-winning author Brandy Colbert seeks to answer the many questions surrounding the massacre. In examining the tension that was brought to a boil by many factors, a portrait is drawn of an event singular in its devastation, but not in its kind. It is part of a legacy of white violence that can be traced from our country's earliest days through Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, and the fight for justice we still face today. New Kid is an engaging graphic novel about being black and the new kid at a predominantly white school. Is a continuation of Kraft's work to help students see themselves in stories and give a voice to diverse perspectives and backgrounds. The book has been challenged in states like Texas and Pennsylvania as part of efforts to stamp our critical race theory in schools. However, the book, which has received countless positive reviews and inspired by Kraft's own life, has invited students who may not be super into reading to finish a book.
We appreciate the fact that you stayed until the end. Thank you for spending time with us, and don't forget to like this video. Also, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss a video. Bye for now. We will see you tomorrow.
Like we're not going